Hello and welcome to the How to Be Good podcast. I'm here with Dan Richardson. How are you?
I'm very, very well indeed, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well. It's a pleasure to have you here, and I'm really excited for the podcast.
Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you. I'm so honoured to be invited, and it's a privilege to be here. Thank you for having me.
No, you're welcome. Thank you. So, could you tell us a little bit first, I guess, about your day job?
Yeah, I suppose my day job is acting primarily, or has been over the years. Certainly the last 12 or 15 years. I actually was quite a late starter. I was in the IT industry before that, and acting would be my day job. Filmmaking became my day job, and actually in the last couple of years, and very fortunately through the pandemic, of course, with the lockdown that we've had, filmmaking has kind of taken the front seat for me because I'm making a documentary. So that's been really handy to have that to focus on when a lot of productions, of course, especially at the beginning of the lockdown, had to just shut up shop. So my day job is acting, but always with a foundation of animal welfare, animal conservation, because that's what gives meaning to everything I do. So even though it's not my day job, it's probably the biggest part of my life.
Yeah. And is that something, sort of the animal welfare side of things, something that's been there right from the start for you, sort of early age type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly the love and passion and respect for animals has, but the animal conservation, the desire to play a part in that has always been there. But the actual hands-on and as much as anything else, the opportunity to be involved in it hasn't always been there. That's kind of come hand in hand or side by side with, as my acting career developed and evolved, I found myself being given more and more opportunity to get involved and speak up for animals. So that was perfect.
Absolutely.
So I was surprised, actually delighted to learn that you've done a rescue in Romania. You were involved in dog rescue in Romania. So I come from Romania.
Yeah, let me show you.
Yeah, really.
She's not. I wish she was here. But this is
She's
her.
not.
Oh, very cute.
That's Olive.
Gorgeous.
Olive is a Romanian rescue now. So yeah, I fell in love with Olive the moment I saw a photograph. I saw a picture of her on social media, and it was just after she'd been found, and she was in a terrible state. She'd been hurt by somebody. I won't say any more than that for fear of upsetting people, but as you well know, animals, stray dogs in Romania are subject to awful vilification and persecution, and she had fallen victim to that at the age, a tiny little thing at the age of 2 months, and she had a fractured spine. And you know how dogs can have that utter look of vulnerability and just needing love. Yeah. And I saw, and I've seen millions or thousands certainly of photographs of dogs in need, but for some reason Olive just got right to my heart, and I just immediately knew that was I had to go get her. So I drove to Romania to pick her up. I made arrangements to get her, and with my partner at the time, and we both came to the same conclusion that we absolutely needed this dog in our lives, and had never had a dog before. And it just something just triggered it, and I think it was her eyes. She's such a beautiful little vulnerable sweetie, and you just needed to ensure that she was loved and taken care of for the rest of her life. So, and that's why I actually drove over to Romania. I couldn't even bring myself to put her on a transport, which would have been fine. I mean, that happens with hundreds of dogs, thankfully, all the time, all over Europe. But I took it as an opportunity to go drive to Romania, pick her up, and then bond with her on the way back. And of course, what was wonderful about that too was the fact that she garnered a bit of support on social media. She's a little bit of she's got a fan page, Olive the Romanian Rescue Dog, on Facebook. Yeah, so there were a lot of people following the journey, which of course was a great opportunity to just highlight the issue and how people can help. So yeah, Olive's amazing. She lives with her mum, and I can't wait till lockdown's over so I can see her again.
That's brilliant. So I moved from Romania in 2002, but heard about the situation in Romania in 2013 and started rescuing, and it's surprising how a lot of the people in Europe, across Europe, Germany, France, Belgium, and so on, even up to Sweden and Norway, just jumped in to rescue dogs from Romania. It's a brilliant effort, and I think that we've managed to adopt many dogs across Europe.
That's so beautiful. I mean, and thank you for doing that. It's incredible and so important. And I think I don't know this for sure, but I think things may have just got a lot more difficult in that regard for the UK because of leaving the EU. Yeah. And I could be wrong about that. I could be wrong, but I'm just sort of paraphrasing, really, because of course there were logistical necessities in bringing Olive back from Romania through numerous countries and into the UK. But the only place that I actually needed to do anything that was remotely logistical requirement on my part was getting her into the UK. Yeah. And I don't know whether that scenario has somewhat shifted with the UK leaving the EU. I hope not. I hope it's just as easy, because we, as you know, we need all the help we can get.
Exactly. I think one of the highest adoption rates was from the UK before. So I don't know how things will be now, and especially with COVID, things have become a lot worse. But fingers crossed, things will change soon.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, exactly. So are you still helping in Romania or rescuing in Romania, or the Olive was just the first part?
In terms of my actual hands-on help and involvement, it was Olive and only Olive. But I'm an ambassador for the International Aid for the Protection and Welfare of Animals, IAPWA, they're known as, and they're a wonderful organization that do an enormous amount of work. They've got two real strongholds. One is Borneo and one is Romania. And in fact, indirectly, it was through IAPWA that I became aware of Olive in the first place. So, and they're doing some incredible work in terms of spay and neuter campaigns, because as again, you'll be well aware, one of the key things in addressing stray dog problems is we can have all the angels in the world adopting dogs left, right, and center, but sadly, the reality is the dogs are always going to breed that little bit faster than people will adopt them. And so the only real solution to the problem is a spay and neuter campaign, which is a fantastic idea. It comes with its own set of challenges in Romania, as I'm sure you're aware, for various reasons. But IAPRA is heavily involved in conducting exactly those kind of spay and neuter campaigns. So they're trying to ensure that they're covering at least 75 to 80% of a stray population, and involving the pet population as well, because you don't need me to tell you this, but in Romania, it's quite commonplace for pet dogs to be allowed to wander freely during the day. And it seems kind of strange to us, but actually it's not that difficult for us to comprehend, because that's what we do with cats. Cats are free to come and go as they please in the UK. It's just the same with dogs in Romania. And so, of course, if they're mingling with the stray population, you need to be spaying and neutering the pets as well. And we ran into a very unexpected challenge at one point, which was that Catholicism and the whole ban on contraception, it applied to animals as well. If someone was strictly Catholic, they wouldn't allow us to spay and neuter their dogs because they disagree with contraception of any kind. So there's all kinds of challenges, but I'm involved in that in so much as I still very strongly support, very proudly support IAPWA in the work that they do in Romania and elsewhere.
That's fantastic. And you're also very, very heavily involved in the Born Free Foundation as well.
Yeah. I'm who I don't know when this episode will go out, but this happy birthday, Born Free today, 37.
37. Yes.
Yeah. And yes, I'm again thoroughly honoured to be a patron for the Born Free Foundation. And what an exemplary organisation they are. 37 years of life-changing, life-saving work that just really stands as an example to everyone. And it couldn't be further apart from stray dogs in Romania. You're talking about iconic African species, and not just that, but obviously they're very well known for that. And it's what an organisation, and what a privilege it is to be able to stand side by side with them and support them.
And how did you get involved?
Well, I was really lucky. That was partly what I was referring to at the beginning, in terms of my acting career evolving, and in hand with that, I found that my ability or my opportunity to speak for animals was growing in parallel, and that was a really good example of it. So a few years ago, I was in a Disney TV show called The Lodge, and when that was, but in fact, at the time, and probably still to this day, was probably the highest profile thing I'd been in, because I'm by no means a high profile actor. But what was really valuable about that is, of course, that the Disney audience are children, and there's nothing more important than the future generations developing a love and a passion and a respect for animals and nature and the environment and all those good things that we know and love. And so I think partly because of that, and partly because, actually, ironically, because I was an ambassador for another campaign, which is called Remembering Wildlife, a wonderful series of photographic books. It's a campaign created by Margot Raggett and supported by huge international celebrities, from Russell Crowe, Ricky Gervais, Pierce Brosnan, Chris Martin, all kinds of wonderful people, Ellen DeGeneres. And I was actually an ambassador for that campaign, and in Africa with Margot, to report back to people who contributed to that campaign about, this is where your money was spent, and all of the money that at that particular point for the Remembering Wildlife campaign was going to Born Free. So Born Free became aware of me through the fact that I was an ambassador for Remembering Wildlife, and then, to my utter astonishment and delight, asked me to be a patron. And I can tell you right now, the day that conversation happened, I cried like a child, because it was perhaps the biggest honor I'd been bestowed in my entire life, before or since. I mean, it was just incredible. I'm just so, I'm so honored to support Born Free. They're wonderful.
It is good. So just in case there is some people that are listening that are unaware of Born Free and what they do, would you be able to give us a quick synopsis?
Of course, yeah. So back in, I believe it was 1969, before I was born, I'm pleased to say, but not long before I was born, very, very close to when I was born, in fact, a wonderful film came out, a true story, based on a book. And it's based on the real experience of Joy and George Adamson in Kenya, who became adoptive parents to an orphaned lion cub called Elsa. So this is a very famous film, but I guess perhaps younger generations might not be so aware of it. And the stars of that film were Virginia McKenna and Bill Travers, the late, great Bill Travers. They made this wonderful movie, which was a huge hit, and it's still an amazing, beautiful film, even to this day, and you'll still be able to see it if you've not already, and I urge anyone to do so. It's an incredible story, and I won't do any spoilers about the story, but it suffice it to say, it deals with an orphaned lion cub, and then after filming the film, of course, the lions that were actually used in the making of the film weren't free, and the whole concept of the story is that lions are born free and should be free. Mm-hmm. And this didn't sit well with Virginia and Bill, or indeed their son Will Travers, now the president of the Born Free Foundation. And so they set up 37 years ago what at the time was actually called Zoo Check. Some years later, this is some years after the film, clearly, because we're talking 37 years old today. So several years after the making of the film, and the reality of the animals going into captivity rather than actually being free, and an incredible encounter with an elephant called Poly Poly at London Zoo, who remembered Bill and Virginia. And there's an iconic photograph of Bill with his outstretched hand and Poly Poly reaching to touch him. And that was the tipping point for them. And they set up what was called Zoo Check, which was something that was designed to ensure that even if animals were going to be held in captivity, at least let's ensure that there are some minimum standards that have to be adhered to, that their well-being and welfare is being thought about, and it's not just there for human entertainment. And of course, what Born Free stands for is absolutely no captivity. But in this world we live in, it's a reality, and we have to do something about those animals that are in captivity. They can't just be left to squander, and that's what Born Free is all about. So initially, Zoo Check, and the wonderful Joanna Lumley was a founding patron back then, when it was even still called Zoo Check, and in fact, when it was at its inception, and here we are 37 years later. At some point, fairly soon into its life, the name was changed to the Born Free Foundation, as it's still known to this day. And Virginia is and it's just an absolute goddess in conservation. She's turning 90 this year. Wow, still very much a figurehead of the Born Free Foundation and conservation globally. And Will Travers, as I say, her son, and co-founder along with his late father, Bill Travers, he's the president of the foundation. So they're 37 years of a life, or numerous lives, dedicated to the well-being and welfare of animals. And, the world's a better place for them being in it.
Absolutely. I remember watching the movie when I was quite young, and that having quite an emotional, I don't want to say scar, because it's more about an emotional awakening, perhaps, with animals, even at that young age.
Sure.
So yeah, when my kids are slightly older, I'll get them to watch it.
Yeah, it still resonates with youngsters to this day. It's a very old film, but it really does resonate. It's because it has that emotional meaning to it, and I think kids inherently can really relate to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I wanted to talk about, I wish we didn't have to talk about it, to be quite honest, is about lion farming and trophy hunting, because we were talking about lions and things like that, and I understand that some of the work you're trying to do is to raise awareness about the horrendous canned hunting, is it they call it, type canned of hunting, system they use. And would you be able to tell us a little bit more about it, and so we can sort of see what we can hopefully spread awareness about and do some more about it?
Yeah, for sure. And I'll start by saying that there's an incredibly, in fact, an award-winning short animation that Born Free created, I think about 2 years ago, about this very subject. And it's talk about emotional films that touch you emotionally. It's a 2 or 3 minute long animation, and I urge anybody to go to the Born Free website, and you'll find it very easily. I'll try and remember the name of it while we're talking, but it's a beautiful piece of film. And there's another film that's really important for people to see, which is called Claws Out. Mm-hmm. It's the Claws Out campaign, and this deals with the same issue. And there are many, I'm sure. Bloodlines is a good example. I mean, that's another award-winning documentary. And in a nutshell, what it is, and if you like, it's one of the greatest travesties or the greatest examples of mankind's selfishness and carelessness at the expense of animals, because it's multiple exploitations of these iconic animals, and people are being swindled into it as well. So there's people, of course, involved. When it comes to hunting a lion, no one's doing that unwittingly. Anyone who pays to go and put a bullet in a lion, for me, is morally bankrupt and needs their head examining. So they know perfectly well what they're doing. Yeah. That's a whole different conversation or argument. Yes. But where this starts is so abhorrent. Is it starts with cub petting, and because of that, what happens is you have unwitting animal lovers, genuine animal lovers, people concerned with the welfare of animals, and who think and are swindled into believing that they're doing some good. They're contributing to conservation. So what they'll be told is that there will be an opportunity as a volunteer to go to an African nation and to work with, in terms of things like petting and feeding lion cubs who they are told have been orphaned for whatever reason. The mother's been shot, the mother's been hit by a train, electrocuted, whatever, or just an abandoned cub. So you'll find that there's an establishment with a number of lion cubs that need looking after. And then these unwitting volunteers, and I would have very, very easily fallen for this myself back in the day if it hadn't been highlighted. Those cubs are not orphaned at all. They've been bred, and a lot of the time interbred, and genetic defects because of it. Excuse me. So the first exploitation is that, because the word volunteer is a bit misleading, because actually volunteers pay for the privilege. It's not just voluntary work. You're paying for it. So volunteers will have to shell out, $1,000 or $2 in order to have the privilege of petting and feeding and looking after these so-called orphaned lion cubs. So that's the first exploitation. These establishments are making money from people who think they're helping. They're actually being charged just to rear cubs, which they don't even need rearing. It's just a way of making money. And so that's the first exploitation. That's the first way they're deriving funds from this. The second is what they call walking safari. So when the lion is kind of just below adolescent, it's still it's an older youngster. It's not a young adult. It's an older youngster. It doesn't present a huge threat to human beings. And they call them walking safaris. So it just means you can go walk with the lions. You can go for a walk in the African bush, not the wilderness, not where there's actually wild animals, but you can go for a walk in an area with a lion walking along beside you. And again, people might think, "Oh my God, this is incredible! What an opportunity! I'm not doing any harm. I'm not hurting the lion. It's an orphaned lion. There'll be another story that goes along with it. Oh, this lion can't be reintroduced to the wild because X, Y, Z, whatever that excuse may be." So once again, profit being derived from this animal that's being exploited from birth, cub petting, now lion walking safaris. And then the third step is the hunt, which is the part we've discussed already. Everyone's well aware of that. People are paying to hunt. They probably know perfectly well under under most circumstances, there's nothing wild about this lion. These are in large enclosures. There's nowhere for the lion to escape. There's no possible way out of this for the lion. Ultimately, it's going to be killed. An utter horror. This is like something out of a horror movie. In a really disgusting twist, there's a new trend has developed over the last few years where animals aren't shot with a bullet, but shot with a tranquilizer dart. So the hunter can get the joy of having taken down a lion, but the lion will come out of anesthetic and then be put back in. And there's lions that have been hunted multiple times. Their life is literally about being hunted by someone who tranquilizes them just in the same way as they shoot, and perhaps the lucky ones are being shot and killed. With no hope of escape. And you think that's it. You would think that that's the end of the exploitation because now the animal's dead. It's not. There's a fourth exploitation. That's that they're selling lion bones to China for traditional Chinese medicine. And I shouldn't say to China exclusively because it's true in Vietnam and other places too. But so in every step of its life and even beyond its death, the lion's being exploited by these unscrupulous people. I'll say people and spare you
hard to call them that, isn't
bleep.
It? You can bleep as much as you want. It's not a problem.
I don't have the language. I don't have the language to describe. It's these people. It's so utterly deplorable and unthinkable to me. So here we are talking about our love of animals, and we know that, especially the lion. It's ironic, isn't it? Because you can just pick any Disney animal, and those are going to be the most popular. That's not a coincidence. Dumbo the elephant, the Lion King, whatever it may be. These animals that are so iconic, even penguins, since Happy Feet, whatever it may be. The clownfish since Nemo. People just buy into an animal that's Disneyfied or in some other way anthropomorphized, and what could be more iconic and loved than a lion? And there are people breeding, exploiting, killing, and even further exploiting after death this incredible animal that we will spend our lives trying to save. So canned hunting is one of the most disgraceful human exploits, and as I said before, the worst example of human carelessness and wastefulness and greed and selfishness, all wrapped up into one thing. And the most important thing for those of you out there listening who are animal lovers, who might think you're doing some good and you're going to go help, and what an incredible thing to be able to say, and all the photographs you could get of you holding and petting a lion cub, it needs to be vetted so carefully and so thoroughly, because so many of those organizations and establishments are part of this canned hunting. It's all just a production line, and it's got to be avoided at all costs.
Yeah, it's horrendous. And also, one of the things is I'm not entirely sure how aware people are of this. I think this is still a little bit under the radar for most people.
Yeah, sadly, you're absolutely right, and the reason for that is because the system's designed that way. Because people, they know perfectly well that if people did know, what was really going on, that the bottom would drop out their business overnight, and rightly so.
Yeah.
And it is that disgraceful. In fact, Claws Out, there's a wonderful conservationist called Beth Jennings. She created this film. She created the film because she fell victim to it. She went to one of these cub petting projects thinking she was helping. This is what she wanted to do. This is her way of giving back. This is her way of getting into conservation. And she realized she'd been swindled, and unwilling to sit back and just accept that, she made a film to raise awareness and expose it. And that's the Claws Out campaign that I was talking about. And it's well worth a watch because it highlights exactly what we're talking about today. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It's hidden from sight for good reason, because it's deplorable.
Yeah.
Are there any volunteering opportunities with Born Free? So if people that are interested in getting onto the conservation side or helping, can they go directly to Born Free Foundation to look for volunteering positions?
Actually, it's a great question. There is a campaign that Born Free have in the last couple of years. So the answer to your question, very simply, is no. The Born Free has very few actual hands-on volunteer opportunities in regards to the sorts of things we're talking about. For example, at the Shamwari Game Reserve, where they have the big cat sanctuary, they're staffed, and there aren't those voluntary opportunities that you might think of in the traditional way. But what, again, and absolutely based on the conversation we've just been having about issues like canned hunting, which is by no means the only one.
Yeah,
there's plenty of exploitation happening in different areas to different animals in different countries, and it's widespread. And with that in mind, Born Free have created a campaign on their website, which is designed to basically vet these organizations. So you can flag it. If, for example, you found yourself in a volunteer opportunity and that something didn't sit right, and that there are alarm bells or red flags. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, and I hope I'm not wrong, I'll try and find it while we're talking. I believe it's called the red flag. It's something flag campaign. And Born Free created it for this very reason. And so while Born Free don't have direct voluntary opportunities, they do have a resource that gives you the ability to know categorically that if you do want to volunteer, here are some good ones. Here are some that you don't have to be concerned about. So it's kind of like the checker trade that we're all aware of in terms of when you something is, and isn't it indicative again of human nature that if it's someone who's going to fix your toilet, then we need to know that they're legit.
Yeah.
If it's someone who's they're just dealing with baby animals, then we'll just assume it's fine. It's quite incredible.
Yeah,
but that's what Born Free do, and I'm sure there are many others as well. But you have to be so careful, because I won't name any names, because I wouldn't want to do anyone a disservice. Because I think that voluntary organisations, in other words, organisations that would facilitate volunteers going to different countries, they were swindled as well.
Yeah.
So you might think that you'd be safe in the knowledge that you're doing it through a very big, legitimate, well-renowned volunteer organisation, but that doesn't necessarily mean everything's legit.
Yeah.
Because they too were swindled by these establishments. They're crime enterprises.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
It's very important to be very careful.
We'll put the links to the animation on our page as well, and also the links from Born Free Foundation, so everyone can find the details.
Amazing.
So
Thank you. My memory's that of a nearly 50-year-old.
So I've got the same thing coming, don't worry.
With that, let's talk about your mountain challenge. Yes, 20 by 50?
Yeah, 20 by 50, which is so called because, aptly talking about lions, there are, and this is something that shocks a lot of people because most people aren't aware of this statistic. There's an estimated 20,000 lions left in the wild, and that's, you see, there's nothing not high profile about lions, of course, but in terms of conservation issues, it's not a terribly high profile or well known conservation issue.
Yeah.
At least not outside of conservation circles. Unlike something, for example, like the rhino, everyone's aware. If you ask a random stranger on the street, name a critically endangered animal, they'd pretty quickly say rhino. Well, there are more rhino than there are lion. And and we know that rhino are critically endangered. There's about 27,500 rhino left. There's 20,000 there or thereabouts. It's very difficult to get any kind of an accurate number, but there's a conservative estimate of 20,000 remaining. And it's the biggest threat, despite the fact we're talking about canned hunting, we're talking about this trophy hunting as well, where wild lions are hunted and killed. But the biggest threat that lions, and indeed most wildlife, face is human-wildlife conflict. It's the burgeoning human population, which is completely out of control. No one wants to talk about it. In as a continent, Africa currently has 1 billion people, and it's projected in the not too distant future to have 4 billion people. It's quadrupling, and there are countries where that's happening even more rapidly within Africa, and you cannot have animals' habitat shrinking that drastically and there not be a devastating impact. And so something needs to happen. And Born Free is again exemplary in this kind of scenario, because they're not saying it's not just a hard and fast right. Well, in that case, we'll ring fence this land and no one can ever live there. And because in Africa, across the continent, or certainly sub-Saharan Africa, there's innumerable examples of where lions and other wildlife are living side by side with mankind.
Yeah.
And these are people who are subsisting. They're not even people who make money. They literally just subsist. In other words, they make just enough to get by, feed their family, and live. And that will depend upon, for example, some crops or some cattle. Yeah. Well, in the case of lions, that's prime target for. Cattle is a prime target for a lion. So there's these fabulous campaigns, things like Lion Lights, you've probably heard of, where it's just a motion activated light. It's solar powered. So we're talking about something like $5 per light. Yeah. So it's absolutely sustainable. It's something that can be put up around a boma where cattle are kept at night. If the lion approaches, the light comes on, and they can also make different lights come on at different times so that it's not a pattern that a lion would get used to. Yeah. Long story short, the lion is kind of encouraged to leave, and they usually do, because they're predators. They hunt at night, under cover of darkness. The lights come on, and they'll take their business elsewhere. So now you have man and lions living happily side by side. So there's fantastic campaigns like that, and many others, of course, that Born Free are directly involved in, and are as I said, I support them wholeheartedly. And so this 20 by 50 is 20,000 lions. I'm going to climb 20,000 feet of ascent, it sounds like a lot, but it's not one ascent. It's going to be over numerous different ascents and there's a good reason for that, which I'll explain. And the by 50 bit is by the time I'm 50, which is 29th of August this year. So I want to get up 20,000 feet of mountain by the time I'm 50, hence 20 by 50. I just was looking for a catchy name. That's about it.
Where are you at now?
I'm at zero.
Okay. Because
and I should also mention that the target's $20,000 for, of course, the Born Free Foundation. So that's why it's 20,000 lions, 20,000 feet, $20,000 by the time I'm 50. But I didn't want to call it 20 by 20 by 20 by 50.
Yeah, people just suddenly think we've got a math equation to do with, and it's going to be an issue.
And then they don't want to be involved in it. So, and the reason why I say we're at zero is because I was initially going to do this last year, and of course then the lockdown happened. Yeah. The first mountains I'm going to take on are the 3 peaks in the UK, which is Snowdon in Wales, Ben Nevis in Scotland, and Scafell Pike in England, north of England. All of those are, well, they're not necessarily fair weather mountains, but for me, as a guy who's just going to walk up it, I'm not a mountaineer. I'm just going to walk up it. It needs to be seasonal, so I need to do it sometime around spring, summer, or autumn. And we were in lockdown throughout that whole time. We couldn't, unfortunately, do it. And I say we because the reason I'm doing these, and not just because of the fact that it makes my life easier, it's not so much of a challenge. Of course, I can walk up a mountain. It's a hike. It's just a long uphill hike. Yeah. But the reason
you're not allowed to take the Snowdon Railway. You realise that?
Not allowed to take the railway, but people are allowed to take the railway if they want to meet us at the top, and we'd be very happy to see them.
And hopefully the cafe is still open.
Yeah. But I've deliberately done this, unlike previous challenges, which have been very physically challenging. this challenge or this campaign is designed to be inclusive. I want people to join me. I want people all over the world, whether they can join me on a mountain, which I'm climbing, or do it a mountain themselves, and contribute to this campaign. And I'd love to smash the target of $20,000. I just realize, because of the fact that we're just coming out of he says, touch wood, I hope we're coming out of a pandemic, and perhaps one of the worst financial stresses and strains and crises that we've ever been through. I was initially going to be targeting a much, much bigger sum of money, but I just didn't. As much as I felt I couldn't not do the campaign, I also felt I couldn't, with all good conscience, go up to people and say, hey, dig deep, at a time when I know that half the world's losing their job or furloughed, or certainly in fear of losing their job, and money is much more of a consideration for folks these days. So that's why I've reduced the target, and I'm utterly delighted to say that through people's incredible generosity, I think I didn't look for a while, but I think we're at about $7,000 or $8,000 already, and I haven't stepped 1 foot on a mountain yet.
Brilliant. Well, if you give us the details, we'll put that on the show notes and everything, and we'll probably put a little outro with some bits and pieces on it at the end as well. And I'm sure we'll help.
Yeah,
out
I'll certainly do that. It's a Just Giving page.
Yeah.
And,
so how can we do it here from Australia? We can climb a mountain if we find one.
So, I think that's just such a wonderful idea, and thank you for even asking. I think, find a mountain wherever you, or even just a set of steps, or a hill, or a building. Mm-hmm. So anything that just takes you up and will give you a certain number of feet you've ascended, and just climb up and get sponsorship. And anyone who wants to do that, it would just be so welcome. And as I said, that's one of the beautiful things about this, because it's inclusive. Anyone can do it anywhere. If a certain date doesn't suit you, great, do another date. Come join us on a different mountain, or do your own mountain when it does suit you. In your own, I'm going to do the 3 peaks in the UK. I'm also going to do a mountain in Los Angeles. I'm going to do one in Croatia, and I'm planning to end it with Mount Kenya.
Fantastic.
Unsurprisingly, in Kenya. By the time, maybe even on my 50th birthday. And if you can't do any of those, do it in your country where you can, wherever, absolutely, like you say, in Australia or wherever you happen to be. And as I said, if you're in Holland and there aren't the hills or the mountains, hit a skyscraper, hit a set of anything, just to give yourself something to do and raise some sponsorship, and we'll just club it all together, and all of it will go to Born Free. And you can rest assured every penny of it will be incredibly well spent. And we'll, of course, demonstrate that. We'll show that, because I think that's one of the key things in any of these fundraising endeavors, is showing people there's got to be a transparency. You've got to show people where their money went, what it was spent, how it made a difference, what it was spent on. And so they can see that it's done some good.
Absolutely. Well, we'll definitely work out a way to get involved, and we'll be in touch about that and see what we can do without a doubt. I can already think of a number of challenges I think would be quite fun for a lot of people. So,
well, that's amazing. I mean, I put this very sort of, I just made it up. I put this kind of minimum for people joining me on a mountain. I've just tried to say, if you raise a minimum of £200 sponsorship, then you can come climb a mountain. But it's not like if someone earned 150, I'd say, well, then you can't come. I'm just trying to incentivize people to, to raise a few quid or dollars.
Yeah, well, we'd gladly do it if we could leave the country at the moment. It's a bit of an issue.
We would love to.
So,
well, that's the big if, because it's looking very, again, touch wood, it's looking very likely that I will be able to freely move around the UK. So if nothing else, I'll just do a ton more mountains in the UK until I've hit 20,000 feet. I think the 3 peaks total about 12,000 feet. Yeah. So I could just do them twice, and I've more than achieve the target. But if I can't travel, then I can't do the mountains I'm intending to do in Croatia, America, and Kenya. But we'll work it out. If we can't, we can't.
And we might end up having to get a stair walker at home.
Yeah, or just I'm on the top floor flat anyway, so that's fine. I just walk up and down stairs a lot, and really upset the neighbours, no doubt, but it's worth it.
Put some clogs on as well, just to really. So I'm only going to take them off if you give us some money.
yeah, exactly. Pay me to stop. The thing is that, ironically, And tragically, the very same issue we're talking about that's preventing us from necessarily being able to travel or move around as freely as we'd like, that's prevented nearly all tourism and nearly all conservation, or certainly the bulk of conservation funds come from park fees, national park entrance fees that people pay. So when you go on holiday to Africa, you pay $125 a day to get into a national park. That $125 almost exclusively pays for the conservation of the species. And so we all think of things like Born Free or IAPWA or whatever we think, but there are in-country processes that they've just fallen flat because of the pandemic and because of the lack of tourism. So this is crucially important. That's one of the biggest reasons why I was absolutely determined to just keep doing this, even though it's probably not the best time in the world to be saying to people, "Hey, give us your money."
I think people can still relate.
Say again, sorry.
I think people are still going to be able to relate to it and the need for it. So fingers crossed, it's still going to work as well as it should do. I can't get over the irony about it as well, is that so many animals are losing their funds and losing their money from zoo fees and everything else like that, and yet we're in a pandemic caused by zoonotic diseases, and the mistreatment of animals is ironic and painful to think about.
It really is. It really is, and it's, I try, especially publicly, I try to be very positive, because listen, I'm human. I've written very publicly about this in the past. So I'm not hiding anything. I'm not pretending that I always, that I don't succumb to the pain and heartache that we sometimes feel. And that you've just explained is a great example. The irony of the twisted irony of, as you said, is absolutely right. It's a zoonotic disease. It doesn't matter whether it's pangolin or bat or anything else. We know that we cause these problems ourselves through our exploitation of and consumption of animals. Fact. And it's not the first time, and it won't be the last time. And then the other part of it that I find so twisted is that, and thankfully, because of the urgency, because of course human lives are at stake, because of the urgency, one of the greatest things about the one of the greatest things about the vaccines for COVID is the fact that they, for the sake of speed, they bypassed animal testing, went straight to human trials.
Yeah.
Because I was one of the people that would have been quite happy to say, well, I'm not, if you're going to test it, if it's tested on animals, I won't. I'm a vegan. I won't have anything that's used, that's exploited animals or harmed animals. Of course I won't. How could I? And when I stand up and spend my life talking about the importance of protecting them, I'm not going to eat them or wash my hair in something that's been tested on them. And I wouldn't have been comfortable having the vaccine if it was tested on animals. So I'm glad that it wasn't. But what I find really, really bewildering and a little bit disturbing about the human nature is that here's this we live in a world of immediacy, whether it's, you want fast food or you want your computer to work right now. If you wait 5 seconds for something to happen on your computer, people are like, oh, for God's sake. That's the immediate nature of the world we live in right now. And the same thing apparently is true of threats to us, because this pandemic came along. And for the best part, people were like, oh my God, this is, because of course there are the deniers, but for the best part, people are, oh my God, this is awful. Life has to change. Absolutely. Life has to change to protect us. Weirdly enough, they seemed oblivious to the fact that we were already facing an existential threat.
Yeah.
It's not like we aren't already destroying our planet. It's just slow motion.
Yeah.
And it might not be a disease that could knock you off your feet and kill you within the next few weeks, but it could literally, I always choose my words carefully here, because we won't destroy the planet. The planet will be just fine without us.
Yeah. We'll
destroy the planet's ability to sustain our existence. Yeah. And that's what we're doing. Again, there are deniers of that, but we're doing that. And we were doing that before COVID came along. But suddenly COVID comes along, and because it's an immediate threat that could come knocking on your door, it's like, oh my God, and literally pulled the rug out from underneath everything that we knew as reality, having, closed down most world's economies, stay at home, things we couldn't possibly even envisage, things that have never happened other than in wartime, but because of the fact that there's a risk to humans. I don't know that this has changed most people's But you would think that it would make people at least review their relationship with animals. I don't know that it has.
No, unfortunately, I think from what we've heard, the people, not specifically with the podcast, but they seem to just want to go back to normal and almost just sweep it under the carpet like it never happened. And yet a number of the people that we speak to on the podcast, often one of the questions we ask is, can we fix it? And if we can we do it in time? Most answers are, yes, we can fix it. We know how to fix it, but I don't think we can do it in time.
Yeah.
Or we don't know if we can do it in time. And again, it's speaking to the urgency that you spoke of before. We almost need that ultimate panic to be able to do something.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because whenever there's an incentive, anything can be achieved, and we've just seen that in the last year. I mean, it's not that people were happy about it, but the world as we knew it completely changed overnight.
Yeah,
almost literally overnight, and you could not have foreseen that reality under any other circumstances. You take electric vehicles. We talk about the phasing out by whatever year it is in whichever country. Some saying 2025, some saying 2040. All cars have to be electric, because we look at things from in that kind of, even the 2025, that's still 4 years away. Yep. But most people are talking about a lot further into the future than that, because it's just one thing. The car manufacturing industry, it's got to take 15 years for us to do that. Never mind the existential threat. We've got to think about profit, and we've got to think about jobs and blah, 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 which apparently are much more important than existence. But anyhow, we talk about the long term in a granular situation like that. But then when there's the incentive, we absolutely now know we have the ability to do things. We can literally just flick a switch and say, okay, everyone stay in, no business is open, no travel. And it happened. So we know it's real. We know it can be done, but the incentive just isn't there, because for most people anyway, the incentive isn't there because they don't see any, I guess, short-term gain, whether that's financial or personal, because, I wanted to go on holiday, so I'm going to go. And what I've noticed, which is terrifying, where I thought this would get people to review their relationship with animals and the environment, all from what I've seen, because of the fact that people have nowhere else to go, they're out there trashing nature. And it's like you just said, Gareth, that you've seen that, people are just itching to get back to normal. It's almost like there's an even heightened level of enthusiasm, and that the normal that we go to will be a different, more impactful normal, because people will be making up for lost time. And a great example of that is when, for a few weeks, we had the UK Open, and millions of people flooded onto the South Coast beaches and left 12 tons, literally 12 tons of litter and human waste behind them. Yeah, that's never happened before. So and again, as I say, I have to be careful I don't want to come across as pessimistic, because I have hope. Mm-hmm. I really do. But when you see things like that happening, you think, can they really have even considered their relationship with nature, when that's the way they're treating it? I don't think it bodes well.
No, you're completely right.
Makes you wonder what has to happen, though, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
I think majority of the people will think about their recycling. We've touched this with a lot of the friends and people that we know, and it's mostly they're doing something, they're recycling, and that's where it stops, or they're just doing a part rather than continuing with that throughout their lives or throughout their everyday. They just stop at one single thing, and I think we pass the stage of just one little bit. We have to do everything.
I couldn't agree more. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's recycling is everyone's get out clause. Yeah. If you talk to anyone about their impact on the environment, they say they recycle, and that's enough. Apparently.
Yeah. No, it is. I mean, going back to one of our first podcasts we did, we interviewed most of the class from my son, who was 10 then, and we said, well, what are you doing? What are you and your family doing to help save the planet and so forth? and I would say 80 to 90% of the answers are what we're recycling. And it's like, that's great. There was a couple of people that said, well, we eat less meat. We try not to use our car anymore. And you can see the kids were getting this from their parents, who are obviously that much more involved. So it was a bit of a shock, I think, for us going in and just hearing that was the answer. Obviously, our son went in with us banging on it all the time. He had lots to say, but there we go.
But I also think it's the information as well. It's there's not a lot of information out there about perhaps the amount of meat that you eat per day or per week, and the amount of water that you use, the amount of damage, and so on. So unless you share the information that you share only goes to the people that you know, not necessarily to the wider audience. So it's sometimes people do not get the information as well.
That you make a very valid point, because and that's why I've had a bit of a love-hate relationship with social media, because it's a bit of a bubble. It's an echo chamber. And so you like to think that you have a bit of a voice in your social media platforms, but the reality is, and this is where you have to spread yourself further out. You have to find ways of penetrating beyond this, because if I put something on Facebook, even if I had 1,000 people who gave a thumbs up, the chances are that the vast majority, if not every single one of those people, already agreed with me. Yeah. Which means I've changed nothing. They're just validating what I've said, and they would have done anyway. I haven't changed any behavior. I haven't changed any minds, and I haven't made the world a better place. So you have to find a way of reaching further, and then you're really making a difference. That's the thing that I feel is I'm really blessed. The fact that I'm in the business of either acting or filmmaking, whichever of those you choose to talk about. I have access to the medium, which is the simplest, most effective way to get into people's psyche widely. Yeah. I can make one film and it could be seen by millions of people, and it could make a difference. Yeah. It could change people's minds. So that's what I try and put all of my time and effort into as much as possible. Obviously, with acting, it just facilitates my voice, because any acting success I enjoy, however meaningless a project might be, not that I'm saying any of them are, but even if they were, it wouldn't matter, because if I've garnered more support because of the fact that someone sees me on their TV once in a while, great. Because in the wacky world we live in, that's why patrons and ambassador status exist, because people are more likely to listen to you if you happen to be someone they've seen on their TV or in a cinema.
Yeah,
exactly.
Rather than an expert on the subject. It's kind of a bizarre thing, but that's the world we live in.
Yeah. No, we would love to explore more media avenues. Having said that, I kind of feel that I'm got a face for radio, so to speak. So maybe podcasts and radio are good.
Not at all. No. I won't allow that. We'll have to get you into a film now.
That's quite a challenge for me.
Well, it's an excuse for me to come to Australia. That's what it is.
Well,
please,
you're always
please
welcome.
Come.
You're too kind.
Yeah. We'll cook you some awesome vegan food. That we can do.
Well, that's very kind of you. And one thing on that subject, I think it's important to say, just because I realise I've just said that, and I'm also talking about travel to various countries for the mountain climbing. I was already, and now am even more invested in ensuring that I'm minimising my carbon footprint. And also, I think it's important to only travel where really necessary. And necessary, I guess, comes in different forms, and who defines that? But there's a lot now has to be considered and thought about in terms of, do you really need to travel?
Yes.
So I wouldn't just do it flippantly, all joking aside. And I do want to come to Australia.